Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Amelia and today we're going to be doing my October reading journal setup. However, I want to do things slightly differently than I usually do. Usually I just do like the top down and I've already got everything ready to go, penciled in, and I'm just doing like the ink work essentially. And I thought it would be interesting to take you along for more of a comprehensive look at what my process in creating each monthly setup is, as kind of part of my little series thing on reading journal basics essentially, I guess. So yeah, this is going to be setting up the month of October with me. I have a basic sketch that I've got already, this one here. So we were doing a little ghosty on like a sort of star background, and he's got himself a rainbow paintbrush. Now, how I come up with different themes, it really varies depending on the theme, but normally I either have an idea in my head that just sort of pops up naturally as I'm going about the world, going about my life. I often do something that's not specifically 100% like seasonal, but usually there's like one or two themes in a season that you could call seasonal. Sometimes I'm also inspired by a piece of art that I see, or if I have no specific ideas, I do have a bullet journal inspiration board on Pinterest, so sometimes I'll scroll through there, see if there's anything that inspires me, or also you could just search like bullet journal inspiration on Google in general and scroll through there too. I do like scrolling through Pinterest slightly better. I think it just feels more, it usually has the actual images that you're looking for. Google can sometimes return stuff that's not what I'm looking for or is slightly less curated. But yeah, today I already have a theme idea and an initial sort of concept. You can kind of see the three stages from like the very first sketch to sort of a rough idea of the elements of the whole theme, and then also a more refined version. Now, there are some things I still need. I don't know exactly the font that I'm going to use yet, specifically for the October title page, and I need to figure out sort of like the layout of the title page, because usually I do like one bigger drawing on the title page and then use smaller versions of that or elements of that theme as decoration for my TBR page, my pages read, and my monthly review spread. So yeah, those are the kind of things that I need to figure out. So I'm going to bring you around, point you out my sketchbook so you can see better, and we will get into it. Okay, so to figure out what my sort of title page spread is gonna be, I will often like draw out a square, or if your journal is a rectangle, then you should do a rectangle and sort of figure it out within this. You can see here my sketches for last month's setup, so feel free to check that video if you haven't yet. But I was kind of thinking that I want the ghost to be like painting in the September, and I don't know exactly. See, it's harder to think when I'm recording. I feel a lot more like stressed. I don't know. No, the month is not September. It's October. I don't even know what's happening. But I kind of feel like, the ghost is more of a sort of cutesy vibe, so I feel like the font should also be. But then I don't know where to have him painting in. I am thinking that I want like a large sort of splotch. And then we have our ghosty, I guess. Okay, I might just like not talk for a few minutes while I try to decide how I want this to be. Sometimes I'll also bring in the colors. No, it's maybe kind of like early technically to bring them in, but for this kind of thing, it's a lot harder to understand it in pencil sketch when the color is such a kind of important part of it, I would say. I think I like that. Yeah. I think that's what I'm gonna do. Now I kind of have to decide like the scale. So I'm gonna grab my reading journal now. And one thing I always do is I haven't filled out anything for September yet. So what I want to do is just make sure I save enough pages for it. So what did I read? I wrote, and then I just write like the title in each page. So this is the page we are going to be doing October on. Now I'm a title on the right side kind of person, then I put like an extra page here. So that's what we're gonna do. I just need to, I think I'm gonna Google some cute fonts that I can sort of base mine more on, give it a little bit more flair perhaps, and then we will start sketching it in here.
So a great place to look for fonts is just on Google Fonts. You can find it easily just by searching Google Fonts, and then you can type in whatever you want your word to say. So I've just put in October as that's going to be my title, and then you can choose what sort of styles you're looking for. So you can click between serif, sans serif, display, that type of thing, and just go through until you find one that you like. And then of course, since you've been able to type in exactly what you want, you don't have to download it or anything. You can just kind of copy it based on what you see in the browser. And yeah, that's kind of my font choosing process. And if I decide to go with something other than kind of one of my basic handwritten fonts.
Okay, so I found a font that I like. So I'm gonna go ahead and sketch in my title and also like all the sketch art part that you saw me do. That might be kind of hard to see just because the pencil lines on here are probably gonna be quite hard to see, but I will record it. If it doesn't work out, then we will just skip to the next part. So normally I like to find the center first. It just gives me a place to work from and know where my sort of images are in relation to the page, because otherwise you might end up with it very much on like one side or one corner. And I like the sort of middle of the piece to feel centered. So I might not put the text in the center, but it might go here so that the ghost is here so that the whole thing is centered, if that makes sense, which hopefully it does. Okay, so I don't know if you can see the sketch that well. I found the center, but I probably should have put it higher up anyway, but I'm gonna leave it where it is for now. Well, I mean, I'm gonna leave it where it is, period. I may add some more like little blobs of like the night sky stuff, and maybe I can concentrate those towards the top to sort of balance that out a little bit more, but that is basically the title page. And then what I would do is I usually sketch out the rest of the pages first before I go in with color anywhere. So let's just go ahead and sketch the rest of the pages out. So I've been putting recently my TBR spread across from my title page. I just think it makes the most sense to have that there, and then the month in review can go next to the other stuff that has to get filled out at the end. I usually try to make the like spaces to write down my TBR, I make them sort of aligned with the theme. So this time we just had like the pill-shaped things. Here I messed up the thing there. By the way, that's what that's for. Here I put them in little frames. What else do I have? Guys, I haven't filled out my book spreads in so long. I've got the little I don't know what you call this, arches here. So that's kind of the vibe usually. I usually write down about 6 books. So we're going to divide this page into 3. So we'll have 3 like spaces. I'm probably gonna do blobs like these. However, I also need to decide where the title's gonna go. So let me think about that for a second. So I think I might actually try to kind of break out of like having it be a grid, and I might sort of let the blobs dictate the flow. I'm kind of thinking of having one like in this corner that's like the title, you know, like to be read, and then like a decorative one in the bottom corner that has our little ghosty and the rainbow design, and then I can fill in the rest of this space with 6 different blobs that kind of fit together perhaps, but maybe don't entirely. So the trick is going to be finding out how to write in these in a way that like makes sense. But we can also have like some blobs that are just like black and white, or we could include another ghosty perhaps. So I'm just gonna sort of sketch out some blobs. I may have to erase and redo these a couple of times depending on how lucky I get the first time with this sort of freehand approach. So that brings us to 3. I might throw in like a couple of just like extra blobs here, I'm thinking. And then, okay, I actually kind of like how these blobs turned out the first time. So I'm gonna leave them the way they are, and then I'll probably just try to make the lines a little bit smoother when I actually go in with the marker. Now I think it makes probably the most sense to do the titles with my silver marker so that can kind of stand out. Actually, I think instead of leaving the white border, maybe I will do the title like this outline in the silver as well, just to like eliminate the need for that border and like the outlines of the ghost and stuff. Yeah, I think that makes sense. So this is how I come up with things, you know? Sometimes it's very much on the fly, but I think I want to have a couple of ghosts on this spread. I think I'll have a little guy here, and he might not have a paintbrush. Let's see. Let me draw the ghosty. Okay, I think I'm gonna have these 2 main ghosts, and then I might add some in around like the titles, and maybe just like a brush or 2. But I guess I'd probably better decide that before I color them all in black, because I won't be able to make the white ghosts white again. Okay, I think I'm gonna stick with just that amount of ghosts, not get too carried away. Okay, so the next 2 pages are going to be, as usual, the month. Oh, this one I did TBR here. Anyway, they're gonna be the month in review and pages read trackers. So I do the pages read the same way every time. Every 4 spaces is 100 pages, and then the bottom is going to be the dates. So we can just sketch that in quickly. And then I need to just do headers for both of those. I think for this one I might do like a large swath of color, and then instead of having the ghost like just do the brush perhaps. So let's see, I kind of don't have that much room to make it this wide. Maybe I'll make it slightly narrower. I very much sort of typically do these pages just kind of off the cuff. I don't really plan them because I'm just really doing like the decorations essentially, because the actual like layout is pretty much the same every time, which just kind of makes it easier for me. I don't have to come up with a new design every time for the layout. I mean, obviously if you want to go for it, that can be fun. Okay, and then I'm going to go back. I was using Google Fonts to find the font, so I'm just going to open that website up and change the preview text to my title, although I'm not really super concerned about it. And then I do want the title to be like slightly centered, so I'm just kind of counting off the spaces from each side, and I'm going to try to contain the title within that so that it is centered, although I actually may not need that much space even, so I might cordon off even one more. And then I often just like do the letters like really just kind of writing them in, not in specifically any style, just so that I can see how much space I will have if I do them in roughly the size that I want. Okay, so I'm gonna cordon off about the same amount of space for the month in review header. For this one, I have more words, well, at least longer words to fit. So I think I'm gonna not do outlines. I'm just gonna do solid in silver. So the first thing I'm gonna do is pencil in, I think, the text, but I wanna do the like blobs underneath, I think. So it's probably gonna get lost when I do the filling them in. So I'm gonna do it just kind of pretty loosely in roughly the scale that I want, and then I will draw in the blobs. So the first step, yet again, is to find the center. And then I usually draw like a line where the bottom of the text is gonna go. So the middle is this half. So I think having the text be about that size, maybe slightly larger. I think maybe I will do this as the bottom line. This is the top line. Yeah, I think that's probably good. And then of course the goal is to get the text centered over the center of the page as well. Yeah, something like that will probably do. So let's go ahead and add some blobs. And then I'm gonna stick in just like a little ghosty somewhere as well, sticking out with his little paintbrush. So yeah, the next step is going to be, I'll do all these outlines first. I think I'm just gonna do it all with this Crayola Super Tip. Sometimes I will use these as well, but since I'm gonna fill it in with this color, I'm going to use it for the outline as well, because this tends to be a darker black, so you will be able to see the difference between the outline and the fill. So yeah, that is not something I want. And then I also have to be careful not to go over the ghosts, so I might do the ghosts that are inside of the blobs first, like their outlines, just so that I am not going to accidentally fill them in, because then we won't be able to have them. So yeah, that is the plan. We will start with that, and I usually also erase a little bit as I go. I did use quite like a relatively hard pencil. This is 2H, so not like super hard, but hard enough that these lines will still sort of be here once I erase it. So I like to erase them before I start coloring, because sometimes, especially with markers like this, if you erase after, the ink will smudge more. So we're going to erase before. If you use a marker like this though, that's not really a problem. All right, so now that we have everything sketched out, the final step is of course going to be to do the line work and color everything in. And you have seen me color stuff in lots of times. That's what I usually just show. So I don't know if I have too many tips to share on that part, but I will talk briefly about choosing colors and sort of how I do that. So typically your kind of color palette is going to be like suggested or determined by your theme, but there's still like colors to choose within that usually. And I've got probably the wrong notebook to show you this, but let me find a sample for you really quickly. All right, so normally when I'm choosing colors, I will do a bunch of swatches like this to find like the exact shade that I want to use, and that just, you know, prevents me from making mistakes in the actual thing. So I do recommend that you sort of swatch out your markers to decide which shades you want to use. So I am of course doing a rainbow. However, one of the things that I noticed in my kind of tests, like you can see here, is that this red and this orange are really similar, and so in the smaller scale of the rainbow you barely notice the difference. So I want to try and find either a different red or a different orange. So I'm just gonna grab all my markers and just start swatching different options until I decide what I want to do. So I either need to go redder on the red or orangier on the orange, and I'll also like swatch them compared to each other. So that's a new red, like a reddier red, darker red, versus the original orange. And you can already see There's a lot more of a difference there. This orange seems kind of too pale. It's not like more orange, it's just paler. So I think no on that. I don't actually think I have that many good oranges. Like that's not really orange so much as it is like burnt sienna almost. I do also have some Tombos, and I have a very orange Tombow, which could be an option. It's totally okay to mix different types of markers, by the way. Like, there's no rule that says you can't use a Crayola and a Tombow next to each other. So definitely just find the colors in whichever marker you like. Obviously, if it's like a totally different base, you might notice more. But since these are all like water-based markers, you're probably not going to notice that much of a difference. Now I'm trying to decide if I should use all Tombows. Actually, I want to say I prefer this yellow, but actually when they're next to each other, they're kind of exactly the same, aren't they? I don't know if I have a full rainbow of Tombows though. I have the green, so that would be these four. I have a lot of options for blue and purple, but since I'm kind of in the bright scheme, I want to stick with like a bright blue. This one's really quite pale, so maybe not that. But then I think this is too dark. Actually, it's kind of equally bright as the other ones, so that might be a correct choice. Then we have a couple purple options. That one's really pale. It is nice though. And then I think this one is more like, you know what, actually that is extremely purple. Actually, that's kind of like a perfect rainbow in terms of like they're all the same like saturation and brightness. So I may actually do that. I might go with all Tombows, which is good because, you know, they're expensive markers. I have them, I should use them. And then in case you're wondering the numbers for these, this one is 856, 933, 055. Oh, this one's like missing its number. I think it says 173, 493, and 665, I believe. So those are the number options for these. And the good thing about these is I can also use the fine ends to do smaller rainbows. So that's pretty much all there is to color selections, really just swatching things, comparing them against each other until you find the ones that work together. And then kind of the last step before you color everything in is just going to be doing any line work that you want to do. So for example, with this sort of thing, I did all of these lines first and then color everything in. Now, depending on the type of fine liner that you're using, you're going to want to let it dry. So I'm using, in this I used, I believe it was the Sakura Pigma Microns. Those dry really quick and they typically don't like smudge. But if you're using just like a black marker or a black pen, you really want to let that dry. Otherwise, when you go in with the color, it's going to drag the black pigment into your drawing. And I'm sure I could probably find an example. But typically I use the Sakura, so it's not as much as an issue. Oops, I lost my spot. There we go. Now with this one, these are all gonna be filled in black. So I'm trying to decide if I should do that first or do the color first. I think in this case, I am actually going to start with the color first. Yes, that's my final answer. I'm gonna start with the color first, and then I'm gonna go in and fill in the black spots as well as, okay, I'm gonna do, here is my final answer. I'm gonna do the color first, and then I'm gonna use the silver to do the outlines of like the ghost and stuff, and then I'm gonna do the black backgrounds, and then finally I'm gonna use the silver to do the kind of like star bits in the black background. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do now. I don't think I have any further tips or anything to give you, so I'm gonna color this in and I will take you with me for the ride. I hope you will enjoy.